and welcome to the debate. I'm your host MAQBOOL with you at PTB World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at the current political situation in the country, with, of course, the PTI'S protest and rally continuing and the protesters reaching D Chowk in Islamabad. And, of course, this is something that the Chief Minister of KP and the wife of the founder of the PTI have been leading. But what, of course, is concerning in terms of what is happening is with regards to the loss of lives, with of course, many security personnel that have lost their lives, many others that have been injured, including claims also from the PTI that protesters have also been targeted. So we're going to be taking a look at whether or not that is true and whether or not this is a situation that can be put under control given the current scenario, given how far the PTI has come with reference to its rhetoric and the way that they have been claiming that they will not leave and will not go without the release of the prisoners and, of course, the founder of the PTI in particular. And before that, there will also be no negotiation, something which have been more or less also confirmed by the Interior Minister, who earlier did say that there was a different route and place offered for the sit-in, which was something that was communicated to the PTI and also more or less agreed, but that wasn't something that was abided by. And then, of course, with reference to where we are heading, there seems to be a stalemate in the government and PTI talks, and there haven't been any real reports coming forward as to what sort of progress or initiatives have been taken on that front. Whether that is a possibility or not, of course, we see right now it doesn't seem to be the case. Whether that's going to change in the future, of course, is a question mark. But what we're going to be taking a look at is what is going to be the impact and the influence of such protests and rallies on the roads and the damage that they have been causing to the people and the economy of the country. And then, of course, with very important visits of the Belarusian leadership as well in Pakistan. And this is something that, of course, again, impacts the position of the country and where it puts us in terms of the importance and responsibility of decision makers and politicians. And so we're going to be taking a look at what that means in terms of the government's response and the way that they're going to be handling the PTI and the current protests. So that's what we're going to be taking a look at in our show today. For this and more, as always, I've been joined in the studio by senior analyst FARRUKH PITAFI and Raja Faisal, and we've also been joined online by Dr. NIAZ MURTAZA, who's a senior political analyst. Thank you very much, Dr. NIAZ, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. And I'll start with you with reference to what has been going on. We've been talking about the PTI previously as well, and we've seen such calls and rallies happen in the past as well. And it seems that every time that this has happened now, it has increasingly been a problem and concerning in terms of where the government stands, where the country stands, and the damage that it does to the people of Pakistan. And so I want your take in terms of the rally in general, in terms of what the PTI hopes to even achieve, whether or not this is going to be something that will result in any favors for the PTI, whether direct in terms of the demand of release of prisoners and, of course, that of the founder of PTI, or whether politically having any sort of leverage in terms of this particular rally providing any pressure support to the PTI. Does that seem to be the case eventually coming out of this particular rally? What seems to be the gain that the PTI truly has in mind?
Well, I think the first thing to really, talk about is, the loss of life. There's reports of several people being killed, some law enforcement agency people, some civilians. So that's really unfortunate because, whatever happens now in the future, those lives are not coming back. So I think that's the most important thing to talk about and condemn, and there is a need to have a thorough investigation on how those lives were lost, and whoever did it, obviously they should be punished. Then the other thing is the unfortunate fact that we've reached a stage. I remember we were having a discussion about these issues even last week, and everybody agreed that the best course forward would be for talks to be held between the two sides so that things don't come to the worst. Unfortunately, they've come to the worst, which means there's been a breakdown of the political process, and that's a failure of politicians on all sides, because it's their job to talk and sort out things before they degenerate into violence. So, and then beyond the loss of life, there's also the loss of image for the country. There's nothing wrong if if there are protests in the capital city. They happen all around the world, but it's bad when they degenerate into violence and the loss of life. So it was, if it was just the images of a peaceful protest going around the world, there would be nothing wrong with it. It, in fact, it would show, the strength of, democracy and the political process that, an opposition party is protesting peacefully. But unfortunately, now the images that are going abroad is one of violence in Pakistan, which is
Right.
unfortunate because, Pakistan has been struggling to break away that image of, being a violence prone country. But in the last, several months, there's been incidents after incidents which are shattering that image that Pakistan has been, desperately trying to, build of, a place where investment can come, tourists can come, cricket teams can come. So that obviously is going to get shattered. And already I see a news that, the Sri Lanka A team series is going to get disrupted and, postponed now. So this is, the issue. Unfortunately, PTI has some legitimate grievances. The government has the legitimate duty to, maintain peace and make sure that, things don't degenerate. And the when you have, some truth on this side, some truth on that side, some problems on this side, some problems on that side, what neutral people, objective observers can, suggest is for both sides to sit together and try to resolve these issues. There's loss of life, there's be the impact on the economy, there'll be the discomfort, inconvenience to the civilians in Islamabad, especially in the area around Blue area, which is practically shut down. The whole city, in fact, is shut down, and I have been, struggling to travel for my daily needs. So it's just unfortunate, and even at this late stage, one would suggest that, somehow the two sides should come together and try to resolve this issue in a peaceful manner.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Niaz, I'm glad you mentioned with regards to, of course, the loss of lives and the violence, and that, of course, is extremely important. And we understand that protests happen internationally, but they have to be peaceful. But there's also, of course, claims coming in from the PTI that they have been calling for their protesters to be peaceful and that there are spoilers and that can potentially cause a lot of trouble. And so I want your take on that, whether that's the case or not, in your opinion. And even if that is the case, even in that scenario, does it not? Does the onus not lie still on the party to ensure that that they have their workers in position, that they know what exactly they're going to do in terms of protesting in a peaceful manner?
Well, definitely, of course, there is the right to do peaceful protest, but then there is also the duty to do peaceful protest. And, if a party, decides to bring thousands of people, there's always, the chance that, something will go wrong, even if the intentions are good, even if the intentions were initially to have a peaceful protest, anything small, any misunderstanding, any confrontation can quickly lead to, frayed temperatures. And it's all the more important for, the leaders of the party to, fully brief their workers, establish, proper protocols and how things will work, maintain strong communication across the cadres at all times, so that if any problems arises, they can quickly be dealt with and things don't go out of hand. And similarly, the same, the duty of the government is obviously even higher because it's, the party in power with control of the administrative and the means of violence. So it's unfortunate. Now, I'm not in a position to say, there's conflicting news items in the media, on the social media, on how things degenerated, even with, the deaths of the rangers, is conflicting information floating around. So I don't want to, hazard a guess on, which side was wrong and which side did that. But obviously, the important thing is that both sides should step back and try to still at this late stage try to, salvage the situation so that it gets worse. I don't know what would be the plan to, clear thousands of people in D chalk. I would not recommend that the government try to use force to do that. I think negotiations are still the way forward. to at least come to a stage where at least some of the demands can be met. Releasing a few people. There have been suggestions to convert Banigala into some sort of a sub jail. Withdrawal of some of the cases. These can create the conditions, the necessary goodwill for the talks to proceed, for negotiations to happen, and violence and the use of violence from both sides should really not be the first, or even any option at this stage. It would be bad for the country.
Absolutely. And Faisal, I want your take on that, because when we talk about the fact that, of course, we have the responsibility to be peaceful, and we want this to continue in a peaceful manner. And I want your take on how that will be possible, given the kind of rhetoric that we've seen coming in from the PTI, given the fact that both sides have been talking about how there's a stalemate, how there's no real negotiation happening, whether or not there will be any backdoor channels that can be used, whether or not there will be any way forward in terms of engaging with the party, whether that's an option or not. And if not, what other options do we have at this point in time where we have these people sitting in G-Chowk in Islamabad?
Sana, that's a very good question. And when obviously we talk about PTI as a party, especially PTI as a party that has been obviously seeing the action for last 2 years, whatever they have gone through, whatever they have come out of, and today finally they have reached to G-Chowk after 3 days of consecutive obviously travel to Islamabad. And earlier it was being expected that they might go elsewhere. There could have been a place that could have been given to them previously, as Dr. NIAZ rightly pointed out. I mean, last week we talked about it, that was the time to of course talk to them, and that protest could have been designated to Sangrani place, and that could have been a better choice for the government as well as the PTI as well. Right now, of course, both sides, they have their horns locked, and this is where, if we expect from PTI what kind of steps they might be looking into, then I don't see them relying upon getting their of course previous Supremo Imran Khan to Banigala or any other destination. They would not be of course happy with it. They have a set of demands, and them demands are that of course they want this is what they claim, that they want to change the regime, number one, and number two, they want all of the elections, Form 45s, they want them to be reopened, and they want the probe to be taken seriously, and they believe that they were made the elections, they won the elections, but of course there were certain forces, as they claim, that they were behind their loss, and they of course want to get back to parliament. And this is the power struggle, and that's how a power struggle works. Right now, if they have reached here, they will be having another thing in their mind, and that would be that this is the day that we have reached here. This is the time, whatever the demands we have, we the people are with this party, and of course we are in larger numbers, so we should be staying here for ultimate goals, and their ultimate goals, of course, whatever they have, and unless them ultimate goals are done and dusted, they will not be moving away from here. For me, I think government has double responsibility in terms of course they are not only to ensure the people of Islamabad's safety, but the safety of the people who have come here. Ultimately, I mean, them people, they are Pakistanis as well, and this is a tricky situation for law enforcing authorities, for the police. I mean, I have been going through all of these people who are out there in terms of trying to secure the capital city, trying to maintain law and order, and this is the toughest job they have. Why I say this? Because at the same time they have to have use of a minimum of the force to of course disrupt the masses, and when of course something goes wrong, then there are casualties, there are people who get injured, and that too becomes the responsibility once more of the government. And we have already seen that the policemen, the rangers, they have laid their lives to of course safeguard people of Islamabad. And as you were before the program, you yourself were mentioning about you actually hail from an area which is quite close to the road that they actually came through. Still there will be no place outside where you could stand and of course inhale oxygen in, because the impact still would be there.
Right.
They tried to stop them, they didn't stop, they are here now. Future, what I see, I mean, I still believe that there are people who can talk, who can take the ultimate decisions, and them decisions, they need to be taken, they are needed to be taken before another episode of violence takes place. Violence is not the answer.
Do you have any insight for us if that is taking place or not?
I have insight, and that is that people who are responsible for law and order, who are responsible for the state itself, they are involved in backdoor channels, in which they are trying their best that the application of violence, it should be negated, the equation should be free of the violence, and everything goes smooth without another blood is spilled out there.
Absolutely, and that is of course something that we all hope for. But Farrukh, I also want your take on the kind of possibilities that exist, or what approach the government should be taking in. But before you actually also comment on that, add to it also in terms of what we're seeing, the leadership that seems to be emerging out of these political rallies. We have of course the CMKP there as well, but we also have the wife of the founder of the PTI, and it seems that both have of course come in the forefront and given their own statements, and this is a lot of the political element with Bushra Bibi is what we've seen throughout this particular rally as well. What does that mean for the leadership of the PTI, and who does it really stand with, and who are the followers really looking at this moment?
Thank you very much, Sanam. It is fortuitous that you have actually started with a leadership question, because I think that this is one person show, and I think that it is primarily, you must have heard the Interior Minister also repeatedly talking about one person, and that is Bushra Bibi, the wife of the former Prime Minister, right? I think in the past also they came to Islamabad repeatedly, but we did not see the kind of impact that we are seeing right now. So there is some kind of center, that is cohesion. Cohesion is there, and it is essentially because of Bushra Bibi. We are told that CMKP actually, while traveling, he wanted to take a break or wanted to go to the loo, and the workers did not let him go, and they asked him to continue on the journey. So there is something interesting going on there. And naturally, whosoever has the trust of the former Prime Minister can speak for the party as well, and it is quite clear who exactly that person might be. She is leading the charge right now. Now, one of the problems that I see with our analysts and our intellectuals is that this ability, fascinating ability to try to balance between the two sides. Always both sides were wrong, both sides are right, both sides might have something to do. Here's the simple question. If there wasn't this protest, those three rangers and that policeman, had they been alive or not? Simple, right? So where does the actual responsibility come from? It comes from the people who are assailing the system, right? I remember, and by the way, there's in the world of physics, there is a theory called string theory. So that actually gave me inspiration for another one, which is called rope theory. There are two theories, rope theory and end of rope theory. Rope theory, that whosoever is doing something wrong, give them rope, they will find a way to actually corner themselves, right? End of rope theory, there's always certain limit to how long can you tolerate whatever is going on. So at this moment it seems that rope theory is working, and that is, these people have been repeatedly told not to come, and then Interior Minister kept on saying that they will not be allowed to cross Atak. Atak is literally, if you want to understand in Urdu, the translation would be stuck. So Atak is a place usually you try to stop the people coming from that side. It has happened repeatedly. But then this time also they crossed that. Then it was said that they are going to be stopped at Chungi number 26. That also did not happen. And eventually, after three more layers, they are almost where they wanted to be. It actually reminds me somehow something very interesting is happening, Sana. If you remember, all over the world, far right or right, center-right political parties usually do similar kind of things, and the system does not actually get that kind of worked up. Had there been a center-left party doing exactly that, the reaction would have been different. One example is January 6th in America. The way violence at that day was actually threatened, and the way it was systematically, the evidence was dismantled, is repeatedly before your eyes, right? And now, finally, that gentleman who inspired all that is going to be America's president. So what does it tell you? There are people within the system who are simpatico with that line of thinking, right? Here in Pakistan also, we are seeing PTI'S similar kind of marches. In 2014, we saw that. Later on, after 2022, when their government was gone, after that we saw they came to Islamabad, and if they could not do anything else, they actually set fire to the greenery in Islamabad. Similarly, they came last time, one policeman died.
Yeah.
This time also, 4 people at least, we know about their names, right? They have died, and we don't know how many others might have actually. So the logical conclusion would be that there are Manchurian candidates within the system who are sitting next to you, who are always with you as friends, but when it comes to similar kind of times, something flips, and they all of a sudden start behaving strangely and start even attacking the people who might actually be in their corners. So this is the kind of state of affairs at this moment. So one would then think that that's why the rope is longer for these guys. Now, where exactly is the end of rope? Whether there will be any end of rope. The question again is with the way Islamabad is constructed.
Yeah.
Since 2006-07, we are seeing that repeatedly marchers come to Islamabad and they paralyze the system. Then in 13 and 14, we saw similar kind of things. If there is a place called red zone, which they actually try to breach, who is stopping you from building huge walls around it and actually ensuring that they cannot be scaled? Why do you have to always bring in containers to block people, and then those containers cannot stand in the way? Similarly, if the D-Chalk is a place, why can't you actually create a kind of diversion that ensures that D-Chalk doesn't, people who are actually coming from the blue area immediately don't end up at D-Chalk. So all these things are there, and these questions will remain in my mind. So my humble submission is Islamabad is built for similar kind of protest, and they will continue. Now, whether it is going to have an impact or not, my humble submission is that the kind of tolerance that is shown to similar kind of people, of course, this is a good logic, that look, they want dead bodies, you are not going to give them dead bodies, and I think that is a good point of view.
Yeah.
But the problem is, had I been part of some kind of protest rally and similar kind of circumstances would have happened, I would have been languishing in the darkest corner cell in the country. You have to ask yourself, we very casually say, oh, the people have died, and there are more people dying and injured. And I mean, the way we have actually normalized this, is it acceptable? Is it acceptable for any country to actually keep on saying, okay, let us balance out and let us negotiate?
Yeah.
What exactly is the plan B? Why does it happen that for moderates there's a different plan B? For the virulent, you always will have a different plan B.
Absolutely, and that's an important point. But if I'm to follow your end of rope theory correctly, I want to understand what will be possibly the end of rope in this situation, and that could possibly be there for any action to be taken.
I know what exactly that would constitute.
Okay.
In 2014, we saw that there was this idea. When remember, in 2014, army was deployed to various government structures. If they try to breach this place, and if they want to actually harm state apparatus in any way, then it is going to be, I think, end of rope theory. But I hope that situation doesn't come. In the end, the government will want them to exhaust themselves and continue here. We are told so far that they haven't actually brought with them any provisions. I'm sure that those provisions are arranged very easily. In the past also that was done. But if things go beyond that, remember in 2014, despite saying all those things, PTV was attacked, and then not only PTV, Parliament was also attacked, right? They tried to actually demolish the gate. So at that time there was a kind of pushback. But still, again, the question is, why are we merely going for shelling, right? Why can't we have water cannons, right? That is the most civil way of actually fighting these people or any kind of protesters. Why can't we have those?
Yeah.
It happens in Karachi all the time. Why is it that Islamabad seems to not even think about these things? So this is my question.
Absolutely. Dr. NIAZ, I also want your take in terms of the future of PTI and in the ways in which that we have seen different leaders, so to speak, emerge with regards to these rallies. What can be potentially the way that this role will then be taken in by the government or by the party in itself, and whatever future scenario that we might see. And I want your take on whether or not this actually puts into question the party's own credibility, and whether or not that will be something that can be against the party in itself and can be actually used by the government as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at the last, rallies that they had, I think it was back in September, they came, they managed to, breach through all the defenses, they reached D-Chalk, but then suddenly, it all fizzled out. Gandapur was leading it at that time. He disappeared mysteriously, and then, the whole thing fizzled out. This time it looks different, and clearly, as Farrukh said, it's primarily because of, Bushra Bibi being present. And, I think she has a larger role than Gandapur. And there were even reports in the newspaper that Gandapur did not want Bushra Bibi to come with the rally. But she still insisted on coming. And maybe, that was again the plan to reach Islamabad and then just fizzle out. And knowing that, Bushra Bibi will not let it happen. So clearly, if there are signs that they are not fizzling out, it's because of Bushra Bibi. And obviously, some people might say, does that mean a political role for her? I think it's too early to say that. It's more like the role that Nusrat Bhutto and Kulsum Nawaz played when their husbands were in jail, and in Bhutto's case, of course, when he was hanged, that they stepped in to, fill that void that had been created by the jailing of their husband. So it's that kind of a role. Whether it becomes into a permanent role in the party later on, that remains to be seen. So it's all revolving around her, which is the strength for PTI at the moment, but it's also a vulnerability, because if the government somehow manages to rearrest her, then the party will again go rudderless. So it's also interesting that she was released just a few weeks back, and I'm sure there must have been some sort of agreement that brought about that release. What that agreement was, we don't know, and how things have changed. That she's now playing a confrontational role, and what the reaction of the government will be, that remains to be seen. But if she's arrested again, then obviously that will put a big dent into the strength that PTI is showing at the moment. So let's see what happens then, in terms of the point that Farrukh made about, analysts always trying to balance things out and who's responsible. There's two types of responsibility. There is, the criminal culpability, which is, the persons who actually killed somebody with their guns or whatever. And that's very hard. And that is only, restricted to, the people who were actually involved in the role. Now, I don't know who was actually involved in this conflicting information, but that should be investigated thoroughly. But when the other type of responsibility is political responsibility, and that is much more divided and dispersed. Obviously, you can say that if the protest rally had not come in, those people would not have died, and that's political responsibility. But then you can also argue that if the basic provocations that were not that have instigated PTI to come into Islamabad were not there, and most of them have been given by the government, then those people would not have died. So political responsibility is much more dispersed, and you can divide that in various measures and proportions to both sides. And in my view, it's more heavily tilted towards the government, because the basic provocations, arrest of PTI leaders without solid cases, just keeping them in jail based on the NAB law, recognizing that the PTI had done it too. And then, the 26th Amendment, the election issues. So the basic provocations have come from the government, and obviously still, PTI also has a history. It started with, 2014, the Dharda, and I was vehemently opposed to that. And Farrukh may remember that, because that's the time I started coming on TV around the time of the Dharda. And then,
That
the
was the
next
only time we
wave,
agreed on something.
and then the second wave of PTI protests were after it was removed from power from the VONC, and it's American conspiracy theory, and I was vehemently opposed to that. But now the situation is different when it talks about the elections, about the arrest of its leaders, and the 26th Amendment. I see much more solid grounds for grievances on the part of PTI.
Right. Farrukh, you had a bit of disagreement again there, so wanted to elaborate on that.
No, he was just mentioning 2014, so I just reminded him that was the time when we both agreed on something.
Previously, though.
Yeah,
Before
that was 10 years ago, but now since then we have been sparring over everything. I mean, during PTI time also, we used to end up on the opposite side. But my point again is that we once again are balancing. Why? Of course, if you talk about any homicide, if you talk about any murder, you talk about anything, there will always be a sociology and phenomenology. There will always be a context. This person was raised this way, that person, this thing was stolen or that thing was stolen. But the fact is,
That's
right now, who is doing what and who is responsible? That is the simple thing.
Right. And Faisal, I want your take on that in terms of the consequence and accountability, because it's not the first time that this is happening. We've, of course, seen May 9th previously. We've seen previous rallies and protests happen, and PTI has been part of such actions and such rhetoric previously as well. And so I want your perspective in terms of what then that means in terms of the party's own credibility and where it stands and where it should stand as per the government and the parliament. Because while we, of course, see that there are protests happening internationally and there are peaceful protests, there has been a lot that has been going on in the country related to the PTI, especially with regards to May 9th, that hasn't really fallen in that category. And so I want your take on whether or not that means that there can be any potential step taken in terms of the party's credibility being questioned, in terms of the party being labeled an extremist or radical party, in terms of whether or not we can see any action in the parliament with reference to this party. Can that be a possibility in the future? Because there have been repetitive incidents where these things have happened, but we've still, of course, just gotten along with that and haven't really seen true consequence.
Yes, so now when it comes to political parties, of course, political parties, they work for democracy, they work for democratic norms, and to them, most important thing is to attract the people, to attract the attention of the people. What if, I mean, if they are declaring PTI as not a political party but a fascist party or whatever the party it is, as long as they have the support of the people, still it is a political party. And if they are not given this margin, I mean, in recent past they were not given this margin, and I would agree with Dr. NIAZ. In past there are certain steps which were taken against the party that of course, people don't accept that. That is why we are seeing a large number of people are still coming back once more. In future, if there are a few sanctions which are put on this party once more, we will be seeing people would be, flocking towards the capital city once more. You can't stop them once again. And this is the very case that actually we saw in US. In US, people like Donald Trump, he was considered as a fascist, who's someone who does not believe in democratic norms, democratic duties he's supposed to do. And where is he now? He's someone who has, the current ruling Joe Biden and his party, especially under the nomination of Kamala Harris, they have badly lost against him. Why? Because he had his people intact. And in democracies, political parties, they are all about what kind of connection they have with the people. And here is a party that still has that connection with their people. And that is why I'm saying that, when it comes to whatever the practices they are choosing for themselves, there can be reasons for that. There are reasons, that is why they are coming back again. If there weren't reasons, they won't be coming to protest at all. Why would they coming to be protesting against what? If there are reasons, that is why they are coming. That's what the point is, that them reasons shouldn't have been there at all. That is how democracies work. In democracies, we always take the examples from the Western countries. In the West, whatever the decisions are made that are affecting the people at large, they always consult the people. They always consult the people through different modes. It can be debates, generating the debates, it can be voting, it can be re-voting, and it can be a mandate that can be collected through different surveys or different modes they always apply. That should be done, and that is the only way in which, when people get involved in democracy, that is when people don't come out for anything. And of course, this time around, we are seeing for anything they are coming, because there are many elements that are contributing to it. And I have a very soft corner for the government itself as well. Why I say this? Because in recent past, they had to make very harsh decisions in terms of economy, and that too was to fix the economy. Because we know when they were given the government right at the time, our economy was shattered and it needed to be fixed. And the only way to fix it was, there were very hard decisions they had to make of obviously increasing the taxes, and then inflation we saw, and all of these things, they actually harm the life of a common man out there. And that's why we are seeing that the impact there should have been there, that is not being seen. Reason being, there are many other factors as well. People's lives, daily lives, they have been affected by them harsh decisions. With the good intent they did, but eventually, of course, the drawback is always there, and that drawback is being seen. And ultimately, the very government that with the good intention was, of course, getting all of these bitter pills, now they will be, of course, seeing that people would be coming against them, not knowing that these are the very people who have put the economy back on the track.
Right.
And they have taken the very hard decision.
I understand that, but I want to question in terms of whether or not there is a possibility of a repeat of May 9th, and how does that responsibility then comes on the government in terms of preventing that, ensuring that that doesn't happen again. Is there a political process with regards to PTI to making sure that that happens?
God forbid, that should never happen. Be it a military installment, or be it a civilian installment, be it a government installations, or be it Constitution Avenue, whatever the place they are. Of course, now back in 9th May last year, what we saw, the protests were in pickets. On different destinations, there were people who were doing all of that. That needed to be probed, and it must be probed. One day, I want that to be probed at the best of the capabilities, so that nobody can ever dare to repeat that. When it comes to, of course, this current protest, this is centered on D square. Of course, I think is considered as democracy square from both sides. One side is the opposition side, the other side is, of course, the treasury benches or the government side. From both sides, that D should be secured, and that D should be the red line. It should not be crossed. Whenever it is crossed, it should be crossed with an intent to make things better rather than destroying everything.
Dr. NIAZ, my question to you would be, you talked about dialogue when we started the show, and of course I understand that it is essential to ending any situation that we're in. But I want your take on whether or not the approach of a party going towards such extremes and then this going towards the possibility of dialogue, does that make sense also in terms of letting a party repeatedly use these tactics to then move forward towards the potential of dialogue, and for us to put the country on hold for any such dialogue or initiative to actually be seriously taken by both sides?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are issues, as I mentioned, the PTI does have a history of, unprovoked protests. 2014 was one example. Then later on, 2017-18 related to the Panama case. Even May 9th, that was in reaction to its removal through the vote of no confidence. And then, the talk about, American conspiracy, which at least I don't believe in. So you can raise a lot of, legitimate questions about, how it used violence, etc., and, unnecessary kind of protest. But then now, I mean, I don't think you can use the same logic and brand, its protest, because they are at least, based on solid grievances. You can still, question the very aggressive tactics to, pursue those grievances, whether it's necessary to come, so frequently. And then the fact that, it's still insisting on, talking to the establishment rather than the political parties. So all those definitely PTI could be, criticized on. But then, there's plenty of criticism on this side too. So, the ideal thing is, for both sides to look at their mistakes, and for the politicians to come back and, do the talking, and for, the establishment to remain restricted to its role as, taking care of our borders. There's so many problems at the borders. They should not be disturbed. They should focus on that duty, and it's primarily up to the politicians. And all sides should agree to, the salience, the key role of politicians in sorting all these things out rather than other forces, and the importance of political dialogue rather than violence. I think those should be, the basic parameters on which all sides should agree.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. NIAZ, for joining us and being part of the discussion today. And Farrukh, I'll come to you for the conclusion in terms of what we
said
stand
conclusion?
Today. Conclusion.
Oh, not confusion, right?
No.
Okay.
Although there is much. But I want your take on where do we go ahead from such scenarios in the larger political sense of the country. Are we even moving forward?
Right, Sana, I don't think we are moving forward at all. I think that we keep on circling. Right, we end up where we were 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and that will continue because none of us is ready to learn anything from our mistakes. One thing that one has to say is that there are forces outside Pakistan who are interested in Pakistan always being on the boil, and those people actually get really a lot of benefit out of this, because then there is the opportunity cost, because Pakistan will not look towards those opportunities that might be knocking at its door. One thing that I was looking at, and that was particularly regarding the Rangers situation. I noticed one thing that was astounding. The moment the news broke, actually, and after that, certain vlogger journalist friends who actually host also, but are very active with their phones and go elsewhere. They were at Polyclinic, I think, or PIMS, whichever hospital it was. And all of a sudden, one person says that another person also died, and his brother is here, although that death happened quite a while ago, bodies had been released. But he says that, look at this person, he's the dude actually comes online totally calm and says this happened or that happened, and keeps on shifting blame, right? Nobody checked whether he was his brother. This is called disinformation campaign. Nobody even had the due diligence to check whether there was anything wrong or right, and they kept on airing it. My humble submission is that every person, when you are actually too motivated towards one side or the other, end up actually inhaling a lot of propaganda that might be there.
Yeah.
So one thing that I'm reminded of, and here I'm going to burnish my own credentials. In 2014, what was different? Similar kind of, build up. There were two parties actually doing it, and they had a far more recent cause, that was Model Town, Dharna and all, the crisis and all. What happened then, Sana? Why did the government prevail at that time? Why is it that at this moment the brain trust that is there is not providing them the kind of narrative that was needed? Perhaps because people like me now are not consulted. So my humble submission is I'm not partisan.
Okay.
And I keep on talking about balancing, but the fact is people want total concession to their point of view. That is not possible.
Right, absolutely, and that is of course something which will be not the sensible way of doing things, and we really hope that they understand how negotiations work. But thank you very much, Farrukh and Faisal, for joining us in the debate as always. And of course, at this current moment in time, there is a lot that remains to be seen in terms of what happens in the capital and of course in Pakistan in general. But we're of course going to be hoping for peace, and that is something that the government also intends to move forward with, and we hope that that is the case and that there is no more loss of lives. But of course, whatever happens, we'll be here to update you further and discuss this in the next show. But that's all we have from the debate today. We'll now see you tomorrow.